Mr. President, thank you for joining us and welcome to the United States. In preparation for this conversation, we reached out to some Ukrainians to ask them what they would ask you if they had an opportunity. We have a Kyiv bureau, and our correspondent went into the streets and talked with people. And many people said they had no questions for you and wished you well, but there was a woman named Lyudmila, who is 73 years old, who said that she was speaking for many. She said, "We all want to ask when the war will end." What can you tell her?
Well, thank you for the question. I think the question addressed by Lyudmila, who's 73-year-old, I wish her many years. And I think this question is something that many Ukrainians would like to ask, no matter the age. I think even the children who got older because of this war, and to the pensioners and those people who have seen a lot in their life, just as Lyudmila. And I think the same for the partners who are supporting Ukraine. They're also asking the question when this war would end. It's easier to say when we will have a victory, but that's a tough work, a work by every single person, like military on the battlefield, like Lyudmila, like all other citizens of Ukraine, because in order to reinforce our armed forces and to mobilize our forces, we need to work in Ukraine, you need to pay taxes, you need to support the state in whatever way possible. We shall definitely win and gain our victory, Lyudmila. And I have no doubts, because the truth is on our side, and we are protecting our children and our parents, like Lyudmila, of her age as well. That is why I'm confident of our victory. And we have a powerful enemy. Putin is willing to destroy us, and his goal is to occupy the territory of Ukraine, the whole of our country. So that's the path.
I wanted to begin with that question because it seems likely, given the way that wars unfold, that the hardest part of this war may be ahead of you. Do you think the hardest part of the war, possibly even the deadliest part of the war, is still in the future?
I thank you for the question. I believe that the most difficult part of this war is already in the past, when we prevented the occupation of our capital city, and together with the Kyiv region, we've prevented the occupation of the major part of Ukraine, and we control the 80% of our country. We've deoccupied that, and they're protected. The only thing is the air defense that we are lacking, but still millions of people are working, are leaving, are fighting. So that's a difficult story. Someone leaves, someone works, and someone is on the battlefield giving their life. But the country is mobilized. The most difficult and the fearsome is in the past. But it could be the most difficult for the world that's still in future, because the Putin is not adequate, and his surroundings are not adequate as well. So if we'll not hold, then Putin, he will go further into the world, having more and more aggressions. He's not going to stop. He's not hiding that. And the messages of people around him are very clear about this. That is why I'm absolutely confident whenever we're saying that we'll gain victory, not because I'm confident in myself, but confident in the whole of my country, in all of the people, in all the military. And what is most important, I'm confident about the situation, because we can see that whenever we start pressing on the Russians are starting to retreat. And now we are having the initiative on the battlefield.
You do seem to have the initiative, but traditionally, historically, going on offense is more difficult than defending and can be deadlier. If Russia does not simply collapse, is it not possible that very, very hard fighting is ahead before you would recover all your territory?
You're absolutely right. This is very complicated steps. Besides, in the south and on the overall, in all of our occupied territory of Ukraine, everything is mined. So the Russian Federation has built 3 lines of defense over the 7 months of this pause. And I have to say frankly, because we were waiting for different types of weapons and ammunition, I'm just saying how it is. I'm very grateful to all the support provided by our partners. So it's understandable that it's hard for us to push forward. Just as for Russians. For Russians today, it's very difficult to hold their grounds, to defend their positions. Yes, they've constructed the lines of defense, but should you take a look in the east, over the last 7 to 10 days, you will see some very powerful steps. We've deoccupied several villages, and I believe that we will have success. Yes, we need to keep on pushing on the enemy, but still.
Do your people need to be prepared for possibly years more fighting?
Well, nobody's willing to have a long war. And when I'm saying no one, believe me, Russian military, they're not willing to have this just the same as ours. I can see their demotivation. Only Putin wants to have a long war. There's one person who wants that. That's a fact, because that's the kind of the essence of his life, and the possibility of continuing his kind of ruling, the possibility of continuing to kind of maintain his control over the country. So it was either he said that it was United States or Europe that were willing to fight against the Soviet Union. Now it's Ukraine, and now he's saying that it's the whole United West or NATO. He constantly searching for an enemy in order to maintain his control and to hold his nation. So is the only person willing to have a long war. So we need to kind of overcome him militarily and politically. We need to gain victory over this person, and that would put an end to the war.
We have a question from another Ukrainian, Yuri Gaidai. He is an economist, and he said, I'll read his words, "The restrictions introduced at the beginning of the Russian invasion and martial law were obviously justified, but the long-term restrictions of democracy are not sustainable. Do you plan at least partial liberalization before the end of the war? For example, the liberalization of television, removing the telemarathon system under which all the TV networks report the same news."
You have to understand that this United News telemarathon, it's the kind of unity of journalists from different channels. But you have to understand that these channels, all the channels participating in United News Marathon, having their own air. So all the channels, they can have a freedom. So there's no kind of editorial policy. And believe me, I understand this, because I've been dealing with that business for 20 years. So whenever you were talking about this person, I may even know whose person is that. So that kind of a manipulation a bit. So the person has to concentrate on reinforcing all of our efforts inside the country so that our country would be strong. And we were strong from the informational standpoint, from the economic standpoint, and we're all were kind of reinforced. And those steps that were made in order to have a unity inside the country and not to allow Russia to kind of absorb us, I believe that those steps that were made, they were right.
Do you foresee any liberalization of the martial law rules while the war continues?
What do you mean by saying liberalization of the martial law period? And we have a liberal society and liberal state. Well, how can you liberalize the martial law period? What are you talking about? Could you please explain?
If I understand correctly, you are in a democracy where some facets of democracy need to be suspended for the emergency. Will you be able to resume more democratic life in the weeks and months ahead?
Мобілізація.
The mobilization of our people. This is where we had some very certain steps in terms of the martial law period. When the person would go to the armed forces, when the person has certain restrictions, depending on her age, that this person could be mobilized. Now, that person could not travel abroad. If that's a male person of relevant age. Now, speaking of the economy, speaking about the production and others, it means that during the martial law period, there is no liberal things in terms of The fact that if the army needs certain vehicle, or if the army needs that agricultural product or that shop, then the army will take that in order to defend the country. So this is where there's no liberalization. But as for other things, I have an absolutely free country. I don't see any challenges in that. I have constant meetings with the representatives of the business, and the business is willing to support the armed forces, and they're willing to do that on their own. We're not kind of in need for pressing on anyone, and using the tools of the martial law period that we have in accordance to the law. We don't need it really, because the people are willing to support the country and help the country to defend itself. The question is, these things like liberalization or others, you have to understand that these are the people who started talking about politics. So that's one of the key aspects. People are talking about the elections, and the person you were mentioning, that person is kind of a political expert dealing with the elections. And unfortunately, that's what's irritating our military, what's irritating our society, that the topic is raised when we will have elections in the country. But then, like, there's a question, what do you want? You want to play politics, or you want to defend your rights or defend your freedom and your nation? And this is a very important question. Now, why? Let me tell you why. Because this topic is constantly raised by Russia. So Russia is spreading that through the Telegram channels, and then the political experts are raising this and, taking this question. But as for the election, the wise people understand that you would not only have the elections, we can do that even tomorrow, but there's questions that is shared by all the leaders of the world, like how do we do that? Because we would need, the military, they are protecting their country, so they will have to vote, but who will go into the trenches? What observers will go there? Whether other countries will be able to send us the the observers, right? Third, we have to take money for that. And, during the time of the war, we would need to allocate some money for that. And I think that's the most important aspect as well. And how the millions of people on the occupied territories of Ukraine, how to give them the right to vote. What do we do with them? Or they're no longer Ukrainians? Or what would you do with the millions of people who left Ukraine? And there's no infrastructure, we don't have online voting, that's something that is not exist. Well, unfortunately, that's the fact. How do we deal with that? So that's kind of political games.
Given all the complexities that you mention, are you committed and are you able to hold elections next year as would ordinarily be the case under the law?
Well, I'm ready to conduct elections at any time, starting from today. Well, absolutely ready.
So is that a yes?
The most important is that our population and our society would really like that to happen and would be ready for that to happen. And so that there's 3 or 4 political experts who are working, for some money, and they should not be the only one who would want that, but the whole Ukraine would need to want that. That's important.
Well, just as an American, I wonder, do you think you will be able to have elections next year?
If all the steps that I've mentioned we can do, then yeah. But it's important that there would be an independent elections, to have fair elections, so that the people would have a chance to vote. If this is available, if there is a slightest chance to have it, then we'll be ready to make those happening.
A new subject, Mr. President, and thank you again for your time. How do you answer American concerns that seem to be growing in some quarters about the cost of supporting the war?
Well, first, we have to be grateful to the United States, to people, and to the President, to the U.S. Congress, to the bipartisan support, because in any case, well, whether they would wish to continue supporting Ukraine or not. I believe if not to support Ukraine in future, that would be a mistake, because the cost could be high, but the cost of the defeat would be much higher, because Russia would go further and they would invade the NATO member nations, and then the United States would have to deal with something. The society will be divided. So the society in the United States will get divided. So that will be a significant issue. Some might say that this is a big issue, and then parts of the European countries are occupied, so we have to interfere. And the other would say that we have experience of sending military to other states, let's not do that. So the cost of that situation would be much higher. We don't know the price. I don't want to intimidate anyone. That's a decision of the United States to make. So whether to assist Ukraine or not, I believe that we shouldn't have the second Afghanistan. I believe that Russia is not just, a group of kind of terrorists. No, that's a country which has only one goal. That is the destruction of Ukraine, the destruction of NATO member nations, the invasion into the other countries, former parts of the USSR, invasion into the countries where Russia had some influence in the past, and then torturing other people. That's what we can see. So I believe that price would be high. And with all this in mind, you have to understand that we are defending the values that United States are mentioning, that the whole Europe is mentioning. So we're saying that we are defending the democracy and the freedom and the people, and that's what we are doing, and we are doing that for many countries as well. I understand that everyone got used. That's not a new rhetoric that Ukraine is not only fighting for itself, but look, let us go back in time, and once again we would recognize what for the Ukraine is fighting, which values Ukraine is defending. That is a joint work, and the fact that the U.S. Military is not dying on the territory of other NATO member nations because of Russia's invasion. So that's a big achievement of Ukraine.
So if a Republican lawmaker who you may meet during this visit says, "What's in it for the United States?" your answer is American values. Is that right?
Joint, common.
Not only American, joint values. Yes, of course, we have the same values, freedom and democracy, and that's why we are fighting against Russia. And they want to cut it, to blow it, and that's it. And they not only think about it, they showed it. They killed our people, women, men. You saw it. They deported children. So they are bombing civilians. It's not about only front line. It's not simple war. By the way, war couldn't be simple, but it's not just. I mean, not just a war on the front line. No, energy system, Kakhovka Dam, occupied Zaporizhia plant, nuclear plant. What is it? What will be next?
There are Americans who have urged some kind of negotiation, difficult as it may be. One of them is Richard Haass, a veteran U.S. diplomat, one of a group of U.S. diplomats who met with Russian officials and were criticized in some quarters for that. I spoke with Richard Haass, and he wanted to know, are you willing to negotiate not over territory, you want all your territory back, but over the timing and the means by which that would happen?
Look, we have prepared, I guess, the very correct diplomatic way. We've prepared the peace formula, and the strategy is right. It worked for the grain initiative when we were developing the plan, how we should be working, how we're building that without Russia, because Russia is always blocking everything. So we are fed up with that during the Normandy format meeting. So we have an experience. We have to prepare the plan, by ourselves, then we need to develop this plan together with the partners who truly cherish the UN Charter and who respect the human right to live. And then we could find a format how to kind of tackle this or that challenge. That was the case with the grain. We built that with Turkey and the UN, and then they separately worked that with the Russia, and the corridor started to work because Russia wasn't with us, and it wasn't blocking our decisions and wasn't blocking our idea. But later on, here's the response. I mean, even that grain corridor that was assisting so much to African countries, to Asian countries. I mean, Russia withdrew even from that initiative, and they started blackmailing the world with lifting the sanctions. So that's the response. I mean, how many times would you need to make the same mistake, really? I believe that with this leader, this is something that is impossible to do. We can't achieve anything. So, like saying today that we are ready to talk to Russia, no, we are not ready to talk to this type of Russia as long as Russia is standing on our territory and killing our people. So that's the condition and the step number one. I mean, we shouldn't be philosophizing about them. Let them withdraw and then find people who are, well, at least capable of dialogue without weapons. If there's any people still left, if they haven't killed all of them, or maybe they send them to prisons, that's a difficult story. They have a deficit with people, that's frankly speaking. Despite millions of population, they have deficit with people who are ready without the weapons while respecting the others' rights to leave. All of those people are in deficit. They are either imprisoned or left the country.
In one of your speeches here in New York, you said, Russia cannot be trusted. Ask Prigozhin.
No?
Yesterday, right, mentioned this.
Yes. Is that your answer to any call for negotiations?
I think yes. We heard a lot from intelligence and from different people, from different leaders, what negotiations Prigozhin had. Yes, for us, he's a terrorist. We saw him, we saw his Wagners on our battlefield. We saw how they, it's not attitude. I can't find such word, how they cut it, our people, children, and they stolen children, everything. But that's why my attitude too, he's dead, great. Yes, that is my answer. But we heard from other leaders, we heard that they had negotiations. And it's not the first negotiations with Putin, with somebody, and after that he forgot it, or killed people, or forgot he negotiated. That's very public information. And when Chancellor and Scholz
yes.
and Emmanuel, President of the France, when they 1 or 2 days before the invasion, they spoke with Putin directly, and he said, no full-scale invasion, full-scale war. No, I never will go where we are now. And that is the answer. And ask them, they will tell you. Of course, they will find, I know Chancellor and I know Emmanuel, and of course they will find some diplomatic words, but they will tell you honestly, yes, it's true. You can't negotiate with the person who really, doesn't want. He is, or I think now maybe not. It is for us really. Yeah.
Does Russia have to be permanently disempowered in some way?
Дивіться.
Look, I believe the fact that they won't be coming to this on their own, that they would need to have some sort of changes, transformation, a new phase for the country. I don't have a slightest wish to talk about their choice, about who's kind of in control. And unfortunately, they support this person, because if they're saying that they do not support this person, no, that's a lie, because they allowed that person to stay in power for so many years, and for so many years to kill people. So I believe that this is a kind of a shady intelligence, or like intellectual people, like saying, no, we are democratic, but somewhere deep into their soul they might be supporting that person and hiding their eyes for whatever they're doing. That's their choice. Our task, and the task of the world, and sanctions is not weapon, are not weapons, it's just another war. And like there's sanctional isolation, political isolation, including UN. There should be no room for Russia in UN, just as any terrorist there. They have to feel this. I mean, you can't impose sanctions and then to search for ways to circumvent the sanctions. This is not fair.
I want to conclude by telling you a few more things that we heard from Ukrainians.
Yeah, please.
A number of Ukrainians raised concerns about corruption and hoped that you would clean it up. I know that in recent days you have replaced the leadership of the Defense Ministry, and there were some concerns about corruption there. In your view, how widespread is corruption in the government today?
Well, first, I want to say that we have a zero tolerance to corruption, and this is why, and everyone knows about this, so whenever we find any detail of corruption or corrupt practices, then everything is discussed openly and the people are kind of dismissed. And let us be frank, the people are, well, who they are. And there are kind of weak people and strong people everywhere in the world, and in many countries, in all the countries of the world, there's corrupt practices or corrupt risks, but someone might be hiding that. The difference is that we have a war, we will be living differently, we won't going to hide anything, so we will open everything and we'll show this. So that's the difference between our countries from others, because we are frankly fighting and we are not ready to maintain any corrupt risks. And going back to the Ministry of Defense, that could be happening to anyone. They have to understand that if there is a risk, corruption risk today, that's a big risk for us, that some country might not be believing in Ukraine, might not, and will stop supporting us. That's why I have a very harsh steps and then dismissals as well. And look, the question was about the price for the procurement of eggs, I guess. So that was a food product. First, well, it's kind of raising this topic is not really an issue, because that's not related to our partners, the support of our partners. It's not about, the use of money. It's just an issue about petty corruptioners who decided to earn some money with the procurement. So everyone was dismissed. And believe me, even those people who were not related to that, but everyone was dismissed. Not only the minister, all the deputy ministers were dismissed, all the managers or commanders who had any relation to that. And the task is given to the minister dealing with the procurement, so that the vertical, all the people related to this procurement vertical would be dismissed. Because that we have a time of war, and many people would be dismissed because there is no time for Ukraine to dive deep into that. There's only first deputy minister is still in position, and so we still have the general in his position. The rest of the deputy ministers were dismissed.
I think you're saying there will always be some corruption, and you will attack it where you find it. Is that what you're...
Always. Я вважаю, що тільки так можна
I think this is the only way how you can, defeat the corruption. You can take steps, you can dismiss people, you can run investigations, and people will have to go to prison for corruption. And that's how it is. And during the war, well, from that standpoint, I think we simply have no room for liberal movements or that's the case for the law enforcement agencies and the court to make decisions, but we have to kind of be very strict and very fast, because we might lose the trust and the support of our partners. But once again, I would like to say that the way we're doing that, the way we are kind of showing and disclosing all of this corruption, it's not to, well, for someone to say that we are a corrupt country. No, that's a different thing. I mean, fighting corruption and being corrupted country, that's different. And, you know, hide corruption from your own society and not telling anyone about this.
Another Ukrainian, Olena Sodoma, is a business person and had a business kind of question. She said Ukraine has a brand in the world. And right now the brand is of brave Ukraine, a brave nation. But Olena then asks, when you look to the future, what is the brand of Ukraine that will speak of recovery and of attracting people back and growing? What is Ukraine's future brand, if you have your way?
Я думаю, що
I think the liberal economy, I think the investment into Ukraine and in Ukrainians, because Ukraine deserved, well, it paid a high price, but it deserved to be a country which is respected by the world, and there will be no other chance for us, or the best conditions or the terms for investments. Not because it's just, you know, some sort of attention. It's like in the war. If we haven't united our society, we would be defeated. And just like that, if we want create as much liberal climate for investments or the environment for investments, then we won't be able to rebuild the country. So for me, this is the task number one. And that would be also a task for the next generation of political entities. But still, we need to make this fundamental kind of issues and fundamental platforms. This is very important. We wouldn't like really to rebuild Ukraine over 20, 30, or 50 years. We want to live in our own country, and we want really to live in that country. So we have to act swiftly, and that means we need to give the tools and the business and the investors with all the tools possible. If you want to invest, if you earn money in Ukraine, here you are, please. And we are moving towards that. We have one of the best digitalization in the world. I don't know if you're aware of that, but we have really a wonderful app called Dia, and people can start a business in 10 minutes. They can close the business in 10 minutes. You can pay the taxes. You can register marriage online. Also, there's many things available online. Yes, the war has presented us with many challenges, but we've managed to overcome the cyber attacks and trying to, well, destroy all the websites of our institutions, but still everything's working, and partners saying that we have one of the best digital services in the world. We have a ministry. So digitalization. Oh, by the way, one more answer to this question about the corruption, because everything could be visible. If everything will go online or be digital, and there would be no corruption. So wherever there is a digitalization, wherever we kind of digitalize the processes, then there could be no corrupt challenges of corrupt practices, because that's going to be impossible.
A final question.
Yeah.
Our correspondent in Kyiv, Joanna Kakissis, was speaking with Ukrainians this week and came across a couple who had just been married. They were just leaving the church. She was in a dress, he was in his army uniform, he was briefly on leave, and they took the opportunity to marry. And they said, of the future, everything's going to drag on in the war. We are worried about the situation, but we are not afraid, and we love each other. They want to start a family. What promise can you make to them about their future and the future of their country?
Promises. I'm not sure that they need promises. I think that people who said such strong words, and I know, I'm not hope. It's not about hoping. I know that mostly our people, such people. That's why we will win Russians. That's why I'm sure, of course, that in these tough days we'll have a lot of challenges, but we have to stay strong. What I can say, I will be with them. I will be with them, and my family will be with them. And it's great that they will have children. They want to have it, and that's so great, because what we do everything for the future of children, and that's it. So what can I can't promise them that I will be with them, not at home. Don't be afraid. Not at home. No. But
I'll tell them you're coming to visit.
Great. But anyways, I'm happy. So especially, the war divided people. Somebody is in Ukraine, somebody abroad, but we all Ukrainians. But my message to those people who are abroad, of course, I can't publicly say now, please come and help. And of course, we need this help. But I can't say it. I think that the motivation have to be, it's your decision. I mean, it's your decision to go abroad or to be in. And that is yours. But for those people who are in Ukraine, though, all my thanks. I think you saved it. You did it.
Mr. President, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed this very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Enjoyed too. Thank you very much.